everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love and we think you should read right now. I love it. You're getting in fighting
That
shape,
was
right?
just unprompted. I had to see how it looked, and I think I'm liking it. Jen, there is no place that I would rather be than right here, right now, for Read This Now with you and the pre-show delivered as it always does. And now here we are, and we get to gush over two books that people should read
Phew.
right now. And I
I
got a good
know.
one. I got a good one,
I
Jen.
can't wait. Let's hear it. Lay it on
Yep.
me.
Okay, so this happens a lot, but at the deepest level, that's what I'm going to talk about right now. There are times where I'll be driving or just sitting on the couch, and I will literally start thinking and reflecting to myself, I am so glad that I get to read and that I'm reading. And I reflect on how in love with reading I am. And I don't know if that sounds weird or not, but it's like this. So this book, here's my whole point. This book is one of those books that makes me think that thought on a really, 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 really deep level. And I want to keep reading books and finding books that are like it and that make me feel like it. Just like that I don't know, I'm getting really weird, but like it's relational. You just want to like hold it and
I can't wait.
I'm so
Show
close
us
to
the
asking
book.
you, like, could we start over? But anyway, I'm gonna keep going here because anyway. So here's the deal, Jen. I want to thank you for being such a awesome inspiration in the world and in my life as a friend and a co-reader and a literacy lover. You told me about this book, I don't know when, several months ago, and there are a few, I can probably count on one hand how many times you said, Brad, this book I'm going to talk about is on your bookshelf in my heart. Or I forget your wording. It's really cool.
That's exactly right. That's
And
exactly right.
every time you do it, Jen, I pay close attention and I make sure to get those books. I mean, I get a lot of the books you talk about, but this one, Jen, it's on my heart book. So let me just tell you a teeny bit about it.
So anxious right now. I
Yeah,
cannot wait to hear.
Yeah, I could retire and just read a few books over and over just for a living and love it. And this would be one of those books, but I would also want to read more from the same author. So let me just paint the picture and then I'll show the cover in just a sec. So in a second. So just imagine like uh, at some point in the future, just a desolate land. It's scary. The world's kind of been maybe demolished. Things have happened. And people, like, there's some survivors that are left in this area. And I don't want to go so far as to call it an oasis, but it kind of is an oasis, or at the very least to them it is, because they get to live and they get to be alive. But all is not good in this oasis because a caste system of sorts has developed where there are some people in this community that are not treated well, and they are like have to beg for the potatoes that they harvest or for like the scraps that they harvest. And the most beautiful thing about this book, Jen, which I don't even know how Donna Barbara
Higuera.
Higuera, I don't know how she did this, but there is an element of sci-fi in this book, which of course I will gush over, but the humanity that she has infused into the sci-fi, it's maybe only ever happened once in my life, and it was to Jasmine Warra's A Rover Story,
Yes.
where you literally like want to cry for robots, which again is probably weird, but in this book, some of the machines, you literally I can't explain it. The art and the craft that she put in the humanity. So a little bit of backstory, like where do the machines, where do they come in? There are these similar to drones, but they're shaped like animals, I guess, in the future. So not just the standard quadcopters that fly around, but you might have like a bald eagle looking drone or a bear drone, and they're rumored to exist. They're fabled. It's not super well known, but I guess the main character, is it Leandro?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Leandro. Yeah, he kind of stumbles upon this this hidden world that everyone denies exists. Like there are lots of lies in this oasis. So I'm just going to show you. I love books that have maps too.
Me too.
Okay, good. I don't know why, because it just helps me transport. So if you just see, you don't even have to be able to read anything. Just notice the perimeter of the map. It's all mountains, and then there are
Yeah.
these scary looking creature serpents. So long story short, Leandro discovers something outside this world that does exist, and he starts asking questions, making connections, and then gets to know. And I don't know how much I'll say, so I'll just maybe park it there. He gets to know these drones and these animals really, really well, and everything starts to change. And over the process of that journey, we fall in love. We have lots of different emotions with lots of different characters. You learn to really not like some a lot more, and that's the book without me giving too much away. So I'm going to show the beautiful, very unique cover.
So
It
gorgeous, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, I just sit and stare at it. Yes. And then the really cool thing that you also, I remember you doing this for me and kind of showing, but I'll just open it up. So it
Yeah.
has the hole in it.
I
And
love that.
there
I
is
love a
one.
die cut cover. I love that.
I haven't seen, I don't know if I can think of another book like that other than board books that are cut on the perimeter. But there you'll see one of and I think they're called Alebrijes.
Alebrijes.
Alebrijes. So that's the name for the drone creatures. I do have to say one last thing about this, and then I'll pause or take a breath. The humanity that we end up feeling for these characters, part of I think why it happens so well is the human beings in the story are able to through the marvels of technology are able to be part of, or kind of through like neural transmitting and stuff, become like, so it isn't just a robot. It, like, for example, it could be, I'm just making this up, but it could be Leandro or someone else. So and how the author ended up pulling all this off and not having it sound weird, like you almost don't know you're reading a sci-fi book. That's
Yeah.
how artful and ridiculously good this book is. So for all of those reasons, and probably a billion more that I didn't mention, I really think you should read, take Jenn's word for it, take my word for it, this one by,
Alebrijes, Donna,
thank you,
Barba,
Jenn.
Higuera. That's
What would I
okay.
do? What would I do without you?
This is what friends are for, right? So let me say a couple of things. First is that I'm so glad you book talked this book. So I'm so glad, because two things. Number one, I thought your book talk was better than mine. And then also, remember, I don't know if you recall this.
Jenn, are you kidding me? I didn't know that was even possible, Jenn.
Always
Wow.
possible, always.
I need to like go out to eat tonight or something, celebrate with the family, because I am feeling really good. Okay,
You crack me
continue.
up. The other thing is that even though I had practiced it, this is a thing I tell my students all the time, is that there are no hard words, there are no hard names, there are just words and names I haven't practiced yet. Like, because I never want a kid to feel like their name is somehow difficult or unusual. Parents choose names for a reason. All of our names are beautiful and have meaning. So I had practiced the title of that book and her name a zillion times prior to the book talk. And then in the moment, I mispronounced it. And you know how, like, you think about that afterwards? Like, all I kept thinking about was that mistake, like that was the thing. Of all the things I said about the book, the only thing I could focus on was the mistake. So I'm so glad that you brought it back, so that way I feel like we could do it justice today. And then the other thing I want to just quickly say is, I think what you're talking about today is the hallmark of great sci-fi. That great sci-fi uses technology to teach us how to be human, like to teach us how to be better humans. You talked about A Rover Story by Jasmine Warga. I could think of others where these are books that, on the surface seem to be more about like tech or these future inventions, but really what they're doing is they're teaching us about what it means to be human. And I just love it. And I'm going to say one last thing. I thought that was the last thing, but I'm going to say one more, is that 2 years ago, Donna Barba Higuera won the Newbery for her book, Remember the Last Quintista,
We'll never
which,
forget that book. Yes.
mind blowing book,
Yes.
right? So when this one came out, had high expectations and it just blew me out of the water. So for our 3.5 listeners, if watch, or excuse me, if you read The Last Quintista, add this one to your pile too, because I think it's a future classic. It's a book that will withstand the test of time.
Yep, and I need to practice her name more too because I would liken like how much I love her books among other favorite authors who I've gushed about over time, like Alan Gratz, Kwame Alexander, John Shu, Alison Gerber's. Like she is up there in my Knights of the Round Table. Like if I got to choose dinner with a bunch of authors and wanted to meet, I would be I would in my mind, that's the scene. I wanted to say one other thing. When I heard you talk about sci-fi, great sci-fi can teach us. It may be semantics, but I just want to clarify. Something I liked about this book wasn't necessarily that I felt I was being taught. It was that I got lost in the people, the story, the hope, the struggle. So I just wanted to clarify. For me, um, I don't know what the intent behind the story was, but the impact was it sucked me in and it felt so good to go in just because it was just so beautiful. Does that make sense, Jen?
Sure, sure,
Okay.
absolutely. We all get different things from books. That's the beauty of them, right?
Yes. All right.
So,
What am I
okay, so
gonna read next? Do you get it? Like what are you gonna what are you
yes,
gonna book talk so I know what to read next? No.
I do. As you do your book talks every week, I think about how the relationship between the book you've read and the one that I'm about to share, because there's always, it seems like, a connection, even if the books don't seem on the surface like they are connected. But two things that stood out to me for this week is that number one, I think both of the books that we talk about this week. Have a running theme in them about the land and our relationship with the land and how we are a good steward of the land, and how the land, it's a complicated relationship. We take from it, but we also need to give to the land in order to
Mm,
continue to take from it,
mm,
that kind of thing. And then also the other piece of it, you talked about the running theme of humanity and how that book, made you feel things, lots of emotions related to the story. And that's definitely true for me when it comes to the book I'm about to share. Although today's book for me is a picture book, but it was one of those picture books that I found myself tearing up throughout, but in particular when I read the author's note at the end, which I'm going to read a little bit of as part of my book talk. But I want to share the book first. It's called The Last Stand by Antwan, Eady, and it's illustrated by two of my favorite illustrators, Jarrett and Jerome Pumphrey. A lot of folks watching this will recognize their work. They illustrated There Was a Party for Langston last year, which was written by Jason Reynolds. Lots of books. They are, I don't want to say new to the scene, but their first book maybe came out 4 or 5 years ago. And so I just feel like with every release, their illustrations just become better and better. And they were awesome to start with. But I want to start by showing this beautiful title, beautiful cover one more time, because if I were using this, if I was doing a read aloud with kids, I would ask kids like here what they noticed. And of course, there's a few things to notice right away. We notice a young boy with an older man. It looks like they are unloading the back of a truck with some produce. Where do you think they are, Brad?
good question. It appears to be a market setting. Is that what you were
Perfect.
going for?
That
No.
that's exactly right. Like that's exactly what I would ask kids, where do you think they are, etc. But then I might ask kids to take a closer look, and maybe they would notice some of the signage, they would notice the sign that says what they sell. They might notice the bumper sticker on the truck that says support Black farmers. They might even notice in the background how on the remaining stands or stalls there are signs that say they're closed. And then, you might make some connections then with the title, The Last Stand, right? It's the last stand among
Mm.
all these, right? I'll show you very quickly the the hard case, which is different from the case cover. And it's hard to kind of see, but this is actually, it's so fun the way it is. It's done this way. So it would actually work like the sign at
Oh
the,
my gosh,
isn't
that is
that neat?
genius. Yes.
Yes, so neat, right? And then the end papers, which we can see are the sign again on this side. Sorry, it's over there. And then the fruits and vegetables and produce. So before I tell you a little bit about what the book's about, I want to read a little tiny snippet of the author's note at the end, which is my favorite. Antwan Eady begins his author's note with these couple of sentences. It says, "Here in this book, I've taken heartbreak and turned it into a story about a boy and his grandfather who now have the last stand at a farmer's market in a community that cannot afford to lose it. I've taken the pain from our world to create beauty in another, in a world where one stand ends and another begins." And from there, Edie goes on to talk about the history of Black farmers in this country and laws that existed to keep Black people in this country from owning the land they needed in order to become farmers, and the disappearance of Black farmers in our country. But in the story itself, we see a family, a young boy and his grandfather who every week go to the farmers market to provide much needed produce for their community. We see that family. I mean, look at this wonderful illustration of the young boy who's in charge of harvesting the eggs while grandpa gets all of the vegetables. I love that perspective from inside the chicken coop. But then we also see how after the market closes, how they go and make deliveries to members of the community who can't make it to the market anymore, and how they are sort of a center of food resource from a community that, while it doesn't say it, looks to be poor. Maybe there's a lack of other food resources, a food desert where fresh foods and vegetables are tough to come by, etc. And as time goes on, we see how the balance of responsibility shifts from Papa to the young boy as Papa ages and can no longer be the one who harvests the vegetables, etc., and how that community gathers around them. But I love one of the reasons, I mean, there's so many reasons that I love this book, but one of them is, as someone who taught middle and high school for so many years, I kept thinking about this picture book as an incredible resource for older kids because it's such a great jumping off point for a conversation about where we get our food, what neighborhoods and communities don't have as easy access to food as others, and what the value is of a simple farmer's market stand in those communities, and what happens when those people can, for whatever reason, no longer provide that service. And how do we, as a larger community, make sure that there are systems in place to sustain all of our communities, regardless of where they are geographically, regardless of the demographics of the people who live there, et cetera. And then the last thing I'll just say, because I'm such a language nerd, is that I haven't done it yet, but this is one of those picture books that I find myself wanting to take all of the text and write it out like a poem. There's so much alliteration. There's so much beautiful punctuation in this book. I can't help but look at it through that lens, and it just makes it gives me like chills to think about how
You're speaking my
beautifully.
language. You're speaking my language.
Oh, it's so beautifully done. And then you couple that with the illustrations from the Pumphrey brothers, which, by the way, Brad, I don't know if you know this. I'm looking for one that will just blow your mind. But the Pumphrey brothers, all of their illustrations are done with stamps. They hand cut the stamps and then hand ink them. So when you look at illustrations like that, you're just like, holy cow, how do they do that? Like their illustrations are so unique and also just beautifully done. This whole book, it's way too early to make this prediction, but I feel like this book's going to have a lot of stickers on it a year from now. I just feel
Mm.
like it's going to win awards. But in the meantime, it's won an award of my heart, and I hope that our 3.5 viewers will find a way to read it. It's called The Last Stand. It's by Antwan, Eady, and Jarrett and Jerome Pumphrey, and I think you should read it right now.
Incredible. And what was his book? Was it The Boy Who Flew to the Moon? The Boy Who Jumped Over
Nigel
the
and the
Moon?
Moon. Nigel and the
Nigel and the
Moon.
Moon.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, and I don't know if that
So
was his
good.
previous one before this, but
It
both you
was
made that one sound just as magical and powerful as that one.
very different, but
Yep,
just as powerful, just
yeah,
as good. I loved it so much. So
very cool, thanks for sharing. I'd seen that one, recently online quite a few times, so a lot of it
yeah.
I think it's impacting a lot of people. When you talked about being I forget what you said, a grammar nerd or, I was resonating, and before you even started your book talk, when you were making the connection, I was thinking, how fun would it be to have a game show that just showed 2 books, 2 titles, and people had to think of connections, like deep whatever, analogies, like
Oh
that
my
would be
gosh.
would that not be fun?
Okay, well, first of all, for our 3.5 viewers, Brad and I have just trademarked this. This is our thing, so nobody steal it. But I mean, I feel like this is something we have to do. Like I'm gonna file that away as a thing
Yeah.
that someday I don't know how yet, but someday that will become a real thing.
Right, right, right. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. If
Thank
people
you,
are
friend.
interested to see other titles that Jen and I are gushing about and that we've placed on the bookcases of our heart, we recommend you go to readthisnow.net because there are some good um, titles there. And even if you wanted to watch videos or book talks from the past too. Anything else, Jen, on that front?
No, just it's so fun connecting. Thank you, my friend, and thank you to everyone watching. We'll see you next week. Until then, happy reading, everyone.